Hey everyone, welcome to today's Digital Teaching and School Connectivity webinar. We are glad you're here. This is an AI Literacy for All. This is a presentation that we adapted from last year at ISTE. 6 other regional consultants partnered to offer this, and this presentation is designed to provide activities that you can use to help build AI literacy. This presentation is not designed necessarily to help you improve necessarily your ability to become a better prompter or maybe use AI or Notebook LM. What it is really designed is for students who may not have access to some of the generative AI tools, but still helping them to build some literacy and knowledge of AI. My colleagues will be helping to put links and various themes in the chat. And if at any point you have a question, we'll be happy to address that as we go along. Okay, so I'm Brian Whitson. I'll be your facilitator, and I'll be assisted by our incredible team of regional consultants and others from the Office of Digital Teaching and Learning and Digital Teaching and School Connectivity. In my regular job, I'm a regional consultant, and I get to proudly serve the Piedmont Triad. Each of our regional consultants is very proud of their region, so we're glad you guys were able to join us this afternoon. So we're going to begin with an activity. And again, these are activities that are designed that you could use with students, especially at the K-8 level, who may not have access to Gen AI tools. But with any of our activities, think about how they could be adapted to meet the context and the type of learners that you work with. And so we're going to first analyze an image. And with that, I'm going to ask you, because this is a webinar, I'm not able to necessarily see your faces and read your body language. I'm going to ask you to follow the following format. We're going to look at a picture of a downtown. Having people from all over the state is always fun, but I went ahead and chose a picture of downtown Greensboro. And even if you're not familiar with downtown Greensboro, I would like for you just to look at this and think about it as a medium to a larger size town in North Carolina. So take a moment, and in the chat, I would like for you to put down, what do you notice and what do you wonder? So what are you seeing there as you look at that image? This is AI generated, so I'll give you just a moment to think about that and go ahead and share that in the chat. Okay, Yulia, it looks like you noticed no
paused
no
my
cards.
video for I am in training.
Okay.
And Gina has called me twice. I
Um,
guess she doesn't do texting because I texted her yesterday. Could you do me
so
a
a
huge
mixture
favor
of
and contact her
architecture
here
and
in a little
modern
bit?
architecture.
I am in.
I know we're all interested in the conversation. Okay, so let's see what we're seeing. There's no cars in the street. It looks very smooth, very clean, almost like a drawing. There's no people there. And this is downtown Greensboro, which would be very unusual not to see any cars or people. Um, the tall buildings, but wonder why the old building is there. Very good. And so this activity is designed just to let students look and see, what do they notice, what do they wonder. And in looking at it, we can do this with any. All I did was just take a general image, or take a Gen AI generator, and I use Chat GPT, and I just ask it to take the image and draw or create an image of downtown Greensboro, North Carolina. And I also have another one. This is downtown Winston-Salem, because these are two of the large areas I get to serve. But when you look at them, there are some very similarities between them, but it's those observations that are super important as our students begin to build that AI literacy piece. And so as you look at it, it is almost too perfect for a picture. You have very linear lines. You do see some of the buildings that are characteristic of downtown Greensboro. You see the Jefferson Pilot building there. But as you look at it, we begin to look at it with a very critical kind of way. Like I told you, it was AI generated. Now I'm going to ask you to step back for a second, and maybe for those of you more familiar with downtown Greensboro, or think of any larger town, essentially, what do you notice that may be correct? Um, our students default to, they know a lot of things that are incorrect, but what things did maybe generative AI get correct here? So go ahead and think about that and put that in the chat. What do you think it got correct? Okay, good, Christy. Different styles and heights of building. Some of the placements, yeah. Trees, street lamps. Yeah, if you've been to downtown Greensboro, they do have trees. So I think that's super important we look at. And so awesome. And so with this activity, it's just real simple and it's designed to be sort of an open end. Now, for those of you who've probably worked in middle school, you're probably going to relate to this, but my son's in middle school and I did a variation of this presentation at his school, and his friends could clearly tell me everything I wanted to know as the educator in the room about spotting AI images and deep fakes and those various things, right? But sometimes when they have to do it on their own, they don't always do that super well, but they know what to tell the adults. So as we go through today, I want you to think about what it is that would really challenge and help our students to grow in their knowledge of AI. As we are getting started, I do have to give you some DPI talk. We're going to use a variety of tools, and while we don't endorse these tools, these are tools that other educators have found useful. I'm trying to use all free activities that you can pull and use as well. But just realize these are not an endorsement of the DPI lifestyle. When we are working with AI, remember we do need to keep data privacy in mind. And if you need any help with that, please just reach out to your school systems lead, technology leader, and they'll be happy to help you understand what's considered personally identifiable information. Make sure you follow any laws, rules, policies, and procedures before signing up for AI tools, and be sure to review that tool's privacy policy as well. As we get ready to jump into this, there are some themes, some core beliefs that we need to keep in mind for the safety of our students. So that data privacy has to be our primary consideration. We never want to share any of their personal identifiable information. And we have to remind our students that AI is a tool that should be used to enhance or augment learning, not circumvent it. And often we hear that from a lot of our educators in the field. And finally, we must be the ones who help our students to use AI appropriately, legally, and ethically, as well as following and modeling the following of guidelines for testing, accountability, and any of your local policies. So now that we've kind of got all the DPI talk over, let's talk about some of our session goals. We're going to define AI literacy, and this definition is constantly evolving. And then we're going to look at some resources and activities. And the first activity you've already done, which was looking at a picture and doing the what do you notice, what do you wonder? Pretty straightforward. An activity I think you can do with students at any grade level. So it's very accessible. So, what is AI literacy? Well, we have a couple of sources, and I know that I've seen several of our school librarian media coordinator friends in. And so there's a couple of frameworks that we could look at, but because of time, we're going to only focus on the digital promise framework. And we're going to skip right over here. And you have a link to this in the slide deck that you can look at. But with digital promise, basically it looks at the AI framework as involving three domains: understanding, using, and evaluating. And what I love about that framework is you don't have to spend hours unpacking a document. If you think about the activity that we just did at the beginning, which of these domains, if you'll put it in the chat, which of these domains do you think that you used in analyzing that picture of downtown Greensboro? Looking at just understand, use, and evaluate. Go ahead and put it in the chat and offer an explanation. I think we're thinking, which I love.
Uh, uh,
Okay. Okay, Catherine says AI to a varying degree. Yeah, so you can make the argument that we used all of them in a variety of ways. Understanding, but slowing, going into how to correctly use. Yeah, the activity is very simple, but it's what we're able to do with it that can really transform our students' learning. I'm seeing evaluate, looking at how images match up. Yep, very good. Understanding and use. Yes. So what I love about this is I don't think there's necessarily a right or wrong answer, but it's causing us to think about what did we do in that practice to analyze that image. So we're critically thinking. Um, so yeah, and so there's lots of dimensions here. If we had more time, we definitely have a little more in-depth discussion. But after each activity, we're going to come back and I'm going to ask you just to think about which of these domains. Now, I will argue that if we use the Digital Promise AI framework, as long as we're hitting one of these three domains, then we are involved in AI literacy. There are a couple of other models that are worth looking at, but because of time, we won't be able to. But they are linked to you. Here's one that is a more extensive way to look at it, but we see some of those themes that are already coming up with media literacy and digital literacy, themes with the computer science, design thinking. And then in that same um, resource is this ideal of AI literacy that we're looking at engaging, creating, managing, and designing AI. And so if we had more time, we'd dig into this. This is an empowering learners in the age of AI, but you have the link to that as well. But again, we're going to just default back to this digital promise framework to understand, use, or evaluate. All right, with that said, we're going to go to activity 2 now. And in activity 2, this was developed by Lindsay Sipe, who's their Southwest regional consultant. And this is a super great activity. Again, we're wanting to see, are we going to use, understand, and evaluate? And if you're face to face, I've given you the directions here. Each group, and I'll make groups of about 3 to 5, will discuss where their group falls on a topic, and then they'll have 30 seconds to deliver their boldest mic drop take. And so we wanted to hear what your group's thought was on this. Now, because we are in a webinar, I've had to adapt this. So we're going to follow this protocol. I'm going to ask you to think about it for 15 minutes, type your response, 15 seconds rather, type your response, and then post it, and then to read other people's response. And then we'll do some large group reflection either through the chat or through the microphone. So think about it, share it, and review what other people have to say. Now, we are going to start with this question. Actually, I'm going to go, because of time, Yep, we're going to start with this question. So, grading policies can unintentionally encourage students to use AI for answers instead of focusing on learning. So, think about it and then share your response in the chat. Okay, and if you will start sharing your response, how you feel about that. All right, Retta. Okay, and begin reviewing the responses. And we definitely have some really insightful people as we're looking at it. And I do think sometimes the context of the grade level or grade span can make a difference for those of us, especially at high school. Um, Last week, Tony Frontier did a webinar through ASCD and ISTE that you guys, as members, can go back and watch. That is about academic integrity, and I sort of pulled this from some of my thoughts from there. So, if we're looking here, I want to go back and just pull a couple of comments. Kimberly, Kim, and Cabarrus shared when policies do not include opportunities for error analysis and regarding then students feel like they always have to be right. So some may argue that classrooms are set up as a point system, almost like a game. And so if our grading policies reflect earning certain points, then it's quite possible they could see the value of learning is kind of sidestepped, whereas just getting the highest grade possible. Catherine said, absolutely agree. Students become focused on a number instead of mastery. And David also mentioned that they want to achieve a score that's going to provide them with what is considered socially acceptable. Exactly. And sometimes external factors, parents, community, us as educators, we put a lot of pressure on our students to have certain grades. And so I think in thinking about that, one of the things we have to look at is what do our grading policies really measure and what do they cause as a result? And so we have to definitely think about that. So I love it. Um, yes, Jason, I love it. It's good to see you, friend. Students are very concerned with the number grade. Yep. And so maybe the focus isn't on mastery, and maybe do we adjust our grading policy? So, yes. Okay, we have time for one more question. And I did this one with students at Southwest Guilford. We just finished up with the Grammys this weekend. So go ahead and think about if AI creates a song, it should be paid royalties just like other artists. All right, go ahead and think and share in the chat.
Hey, Brian, Meredith, it's Vicky.
Hey,
Hey, my daughter got stuck, so I had to go rescue her. So as soon as I get home, I'll be able to actually participate.
Okay, perfect. Be
So I
safe
just
and
wanted to
hope
get
that
in
you can.
because I was like, I'm late. I hate being late. So
So yeah, we'll yeah, be safe and take care of her. Okay, so in looking, it looks like there is some concern about royalties, especially if the AI was trained, which we all understand it's trained on other things. So yes, so in looking at that, we have to think about, now, um, Shayna, you said no, it's not a problem. It's being promoted. I'm sorry, prompted and learning from pulling whatever, which I guess is what other people do. Yeah, I think there's an argument that maybe all art is simply a remix of other people's ideal. I know there's a book about that that you might want to check out. Um, and then there's always the practical question that Jennifer Graham, my colleague, would ask is, how do you pay AI? Do you Venmo it? And what does it do with the money? So they would always ask things like that. If you ever want to get, especially high school students going, they had a lot of reaction to this. It was very interesting. Um, Mallory, I love your insight there that what about the person who prompted it? Should they get something? And that would be a great extension. Should they get something for doing the prompt? And so we're beginning to see these different layers of things come up as we look at it. So now what we're going to do is you've seen that activity, and that could be a great bell ringer. Go ahead and put in the chat that this activity, because we just did two questions, where do you think it best falls to understand, use, evaluate, or some combination thereof? So go ahead and put it in the chat and your reason why. Yes, definitely check out the link Lauren posted for the SDSC webinar. I'd highly recommend that. Yeah, I like Kim saying understand because it requires you to think about AI, how it works, and where it gets its information. Loretta says it's a combination of understand and evaluate. Aaron said understand. Um, Good. So we're beginning to see how this sort of all works together. And there's not necessarily any right or correct answer, but ultimately, are we using the elements of that digital promise literacy framework to help our students understand AI better? And if we are, then I would say we're definitely meeting what we need to about AI literacy. So, Catherine, yes, I think they all work together definitely. And Desiree, very insightful. Yes, friend, there is sort of a combination or an overlap to Bloom's taxonomy. Excellent. All right, now we're going to go to our third activity, and we're going to skip a couple of things, but this is one of the coolest activities I've found with AI. I hope you guys will share my enthusiasm. But one of the things I've noticed is when we are training and building up capacity of others, is lots of times we're not looking at where that data came from that is being used in a chat GPT or being used in Google Gemini or Perplexity or Claude. And I think it's important that our students begin to understand how that data is processed prior to that output we get when we put in the prompt. And so what we're going to do is look at a AI training set. This is a lesson that I've modified slightly from an MIT Media Lab lesson, and you'll have the link to this that you can go pull that up. And what we're going to do is ultimately take images of cats or dogs and see if the AI tool can appropriately classify them. But before we do, we have a question at the bottom. And what questions could we pose to students about the AI training data? So what questions could we pose to students about the AI training data? So you're welcome to either share over the mic or to put it in the um, chat if you want, but I'll give you just a moment to think about that. Okay, good, Marcia. How could they help us solve issues? Is the original prompt of follow-up questions and interactions more important, and why? Who gets to decide what data the AI is trained on? Why does that matter? So yes, and Lauren, thank you for asking for clarification. Okay, Meredith has put a link in the chat, and if you will click on that link, it should bring you to a site that looks like this. And because this may be your first time at this site, the site is called Teachable Machine. It is a Google associated site. There is no login, so it doesn't collect any personal information. Um, it does require you to, in some cases, give the use of your camera, as you guys can see me here, or you can also switch it over to file. Now, initially, what I would do is go through, if I'm physically with students in most cases, is have them train the data so they get that aspect. And we're going to go back and look at that after we go through. But what I'd like for you to do is to go ahead, and you can also do this if you like on your mobile device. It may be easier. So if you are on your phone or iPad or tablet, but you can scan the QR code or simply just go to the link Meredith has put in the chat. And so I've trained this, and I'll show you that back end in just a moment. But the first thing we're going to do is just put in an image. And right now, I've told it to start taking images, and that I want it just to pull from my camera on my phone, or in this case on my laptop. You can also upload a file, so don't judge the all these files. But what I'm gonna do, let's see, is upload an image of one of my friends' animals, and it uploads that image, and it's classified this as 100% cat. So we can look at that and say the model's looking pretty good so far. You can also pull images from your Google Drive. You would have to give it permission. And so I'm going to come down here and just pull this image, and it's classified as 100% dog. So far it's looking pretty good. If we were in person, what I do is I have these different cards of the same animals, and you're going to just bring them closer to your camera and just, see if it can classify it, and sometimes with some of the other things. So here you can begin to see, and you have to kind of adjust, that basically this is a cat, looks like a cat, should be a cat. Let me grab one of a dog. And so generally it's doing pretty good there. But we know sometimes it can be tough depending on a couple of things. So here's a little Pomeranian. And what do you notice about what it's classifying the Pomeranian as? Does anybody notice? Is a Pomeranian? Yeah, it thinks it's a cat. Okay, now let me try another thing, and I would do this with students. Hopefully, you guys can see my son's Care Bear. And now it's trying to classify it. What is it classifying the Care Bear as? Yeah. And so we look at it, and the Care Bear really is neither, right? Okay, let's try this. Okay. Now it's going to classify me. And so you guys can see I have on a little Snoopy hat, and his ears go up and down, but it's basically a dog, right? And so the question I want to ask you though is to think about what the AI tool just did. Yes, Marcia, could there be a third choice? There potentially could be, but remember here, I only trained it as a cat or a dog. And AI, unlike some of the world that we live in, um, AI wants to do exactly what you program it to do. It's there to please you and make sure it does exactly what you want it to do. And so we've got to think about that. But the question is, if we look at the data, and now I'm going to show you how we train the data because I think that's important. You'll just go to the regular, just Google teachable machine. And what we'll do is I'm just going to come in here and do an image project, standard model, and I'm going to classify the two classes. Marcia, I can add a third class if I wanted. I'm not going to do that. And then I can either use my images from the webcam where I cut out my pictures of the cat or the dog, or I can upload, and depending on how you're set up, if you have the images already, which may be really good to go with, I'm going to go ahead and just upload all my images of cats. And so it adds those images. And so it's going to say, these are cats. So I am tagging all these to be cats. I'm going to do the same for dogs. And you'll notice I only have about 7 images of each cat and dog. Okay. And so I've got my images, and now I'm going to hit train model. And it trained pretty quickly. So it didn't have a lot of data. And so now it's going to try to classify those. Now, if I'm interested, and like you guys saw, I can just export the model. And one of the cool things I saw was one of our AI Solvathon teams used this to help program a model that connected to a robot that would classify different pieces of trash. So it was pretty cool. So what I'd like for you to do is just take a moment with the link and go ahead and place some things around that you have around you. For example, I may pull up my simple K-12, and you can take a stapler or something and see how it classifies. And then we're going to come back in about 30 to 45 seconds. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. And I'm going to default back to the what did you notice and what did you wonder from this? What did you see? As a side note, you do have the link to the Google Docs that I use for training if you want to do cats or dogs. But you can also do other things. You can do a pencil, a stapler, different types of things. So, what questions would we ask our students with this, or what things do you think they might notice?
Hey Brian,
Yes.
this is Catherine. Am I able to come off mute and talk instead of type?
Yep. Yep. Go ahead, Catherine. Yep.
So I'm in Camden County Schools and we're still operating on a remote learning day because of some ice in our back roads. And so I have some of my 3-year-old's toys sitting
Yes.
around me. One of them was an alligator, right? Like this little alligator. One of them
Yes.
was this truck, cat car. And what was interesting was if I put the items horizontally, it outputted a different animal than if I turned them vertically.
Oh, what a good and astute observation. Yeah. So that orientation could make a difference. Now think about images. We usually take, images maybe one way, but what if I were to rotate that image 90 degrees? And, if that image was like something that was important, maybe like a scan of who gets through a line at the airport or something. Um, could that be could that create some confusion?
Yes,
So
I think absolutely.
and so the thing that I would always ask students is how could we improve the results of the AI tool? What could we do to improve and make this tool read or do a better job? How could we improve it? Good. Yes, more data. So Catherine, your example of the toy one way, but also train it the opposite way, and train it even at 45 and 35 and 25-degree angles if you want it to be comprehensive. And Catherine, I think that students would definitely be interested in the outliers. We're the ones that fall outside of this and reminding them that AI wants to classify it as whatever classes are set up with. Marcia had mentioned earlier maybe doing a third class or a fourth class, and we could definitely do that. Um, but what I think this clearly shows is that AI is only going to be as good as the data set it's trained on, right? So let me give you a real important real life example. Last summer, my son and wife were in Austin, Texas, where they have self-driving ride shares or Ubers. And those ride shares that are self-driving are trained on data. And so what if those ride shares were trained on data for red lights that run only vertically? That's the way most of our red lights run is vertically and it understands the top is red, middle is yellow, bottom is green. But some of us live in towns where, for various reasons, the red lights run horizontal, right? So let's imagine it comes to that, or it comes to a caution light. If that car was not trained on data, could that create a problem? Yeah. Or what if that's only trained in data that's in sunny weather where the roads are clear and maybe not with snow or ice like we have now in North Carolina, right? And so I also give them the example, what if it was only trained in daylight data and not at nighttime data? Could that be problematic? So yeah, so we definitely want to make sure that our data is as comprehensive. Now, let me ask you this other, who ultimately classified the data as a cat or a dog, by the way? Who did that? You took a model that I set up. So who trained your cat and dog models? Yeah, it's human input. I trained it.
You?
And so, yep, it was me. It was me. As Lindsay says, hi, it's me. I'm the problem, right? So when we look at that, humans have to train the data. They have to tag it, for lack of a better term. So I said, this is a cat, this is a dog, this is a cat, this is a dog. Well, what if I either got confused, maybe I got tired and lazy? Could that be problematic for the output? Very much so, right? Now, the other thing is also, we haven't talked about this, but is this ideal of bias? Because some of the images I may have called a cat, but it may not appropriately have been a cat. It could have been a jaguar. It could have been a leopard, could have been an ocelot, you know. And so we have to help our students understand that the data sets themselves, because they are trained by humans, can have biases that maybe the intention is not malicious, but it may have biases in there. I was working with a high school in Greensboro that is about 98% African American by enrollment, and their staff is about 75-80% African American by enrollment. And I was with them and I asked them to generate an image of a teacher at their school. And the image it generated was of someone that has my complexion with red hair and a beard. And those kids were really sweet because I said, is this someone who teaches at your school? And they're like, no, that's not a teacher at our school. And I said, well, how do you know? It's an AI generated image. And they said, well, we don't have that many males at our school, or we don't have that many people with red hair. But they didn't say the more obvious example, which was the skin tone. And so helping our students understand that the data that we're using may have some inherent bias in it, and we have to kind of think about how we would work around that. And so we grew and we talked about how we could get it to generate an image that would look more like teachers in their school. So with that said, let's go back to our digital promise framework. Which one or ones of those domains do you think that we hit with this activity?
Hey, Brian, can I add something real quick?
Yes, feel free, Kimberly.
I just wanted to say, I do think we are starting to find that students are starting to think a little bit more about biased and data sets the more they learn. I have a phenomenal media specialist, and she had done an activity this year when the seventh grade was studying body systems, and she had made an AI chatbot, right? And all the groups
Yes.
got a patient, right? And they put in what they knew about this patient, and this chatbot, this doctor, was going to diagnose. And so, of course, she knew what she put in, and she knew what the answers to everything was. And she got to this one group, and they were asking it questions, and they determined what it was, and they said, to this is what we believe the diagnosis is, and the chatbot said no.
Ooh.
And she said, so she went over there and said, no, I think you're mistaken. It had this, it has these symptoms, it's this, and the chatbot, no. And it really, so sometimes I guess my point of that is, even when things start to go wrong, right? Like when we hold up an alligator and it might think it's a dog or whatever. It does open up such great conversation with the kids.
Yes.
And I was impressed that some of them I even heard say, like, what did you put in there? Did you have a doctor type it in? Right? Like they started questioning what was behind the bot.
Ooh,
And I was like, that's a whole nother lesson in itself, right? Like, what's behind the
yes.
bot? So, anyway, I'm finding what we're doing today not only really interesting, but tying so much in or validating the idea that not only do we have to teach them AI, but teaching the how it works and why it works and to question might even be more important at this point.
Yes, I think it is, and so often. Thank you, A, for sharing that because that's an awesome story. But yeah, did a doctor type in who trained it? And I would encourage you maybe the next time you're using Gemini or Perplexity or Chat GPT, just amuse yourself and ask who trained the data and just see what it says. I mean, there's no guarantee what it's going to tell you. Um, but yeah, but I love that. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, and I think this lesson, what I love about it is it has so much you can run with and go with. And students can really just go in different areas. So awesome. Okay, we have time for one more activity, and there are more activities in here. One of them is a vocabulary check that you are welcome. You can either check out the vocabulary, which was Chat GPT generated, or a game with that vocabulary. You're welcome to use that, but because of time, we're going to skip over that. And then we're going to do this activity. Some of you may have used this one before with activity 5. It's the Google's Art and Culture Say What You See. And this will be our last activity. But if you haven't seen this, the way I use it, and it has a connection to the Google Arts and Culture. But what I like to do is use it to let students who have clearly articulated that they're good at using AI and they can get AI to do whatever they need it to do for them. And so we're going to go in, and in this activity again is free. You don't have to log in, but I'm going to ask you just to work with me on this first one. Is we're going to write a prompt. We're limited to 200 characters, but go ahead and just type in the Teams chat what prompt I could type in here on the blue side to generate the image that is on the yellow side. So go ahead and think about that. And remember, you're limited to 200 characters. And I'm going to choose one and just put it in there. I've got to give it to my colleagues. You guys are on the ball today. You rock. And remember, we're wanting to generate this, so we don't think too much about it just for the sake of, where we are. I'm going to take Melissa, what you shared. Thank you. And we're going to put it in here, and then we're going to ask it to generate. Now, if you do this with students, check to make sure that your network at your school has this open. And if it doesn't, maybe work with your technology people to see why. So, Melissa, we're going to take what you put in here and we're going to hit generate, and it'll come back with an image and a percentage of meat that it aligns. Oh, we got a 50%. Now you have to get a certain percentage to get a check. In level 1, it's lower. Level 2, it's a little higher. So there's a gamification. And so what I would do is have students go back and talk about how we can modify that. Okay. And so if you don't quite get it, you can always try again. And so I'm going to just pull here And I'm going to just, for the sake of time, just pull the first 200 characters of what I think Heather had put in there. And we'll see how it does and see if we meet the required minimum percentage. Oops, still not quite there. This is being tough. Desiree, I'm going to go ahead and try yours and see how it does. And you can also talk about how students may have different words or different vocabulary. Ooh, Desiree, you got us up to 63%. And so if we kind of think about that, we see, and this is where I would teach some vocabulary authentically, we see the word gradient here. If I'm a student who I don't know that word, then I may ask, what is a gradient? And maybe the kid next to me gets to teach me that word, or the kid who came up with it, in this case, Desiree, and I could say, tell me what a gradient is, and let's talk about that. So what I'd like for you to do is to go to your own version and just play around for the next 2 minutes for me as we get ready to kind of move toward the end. So just go ahead and play around, and I will tell you some of the kids at Southwest Guilford made it up to level 5. So no pressure, no pressure. But Desiree, yeah, that vocabulary is important. But what I think is also important is teaching that vocabulary in a context, because we've all learned vocabulary, memorized this word probably, but having a context to use it makes me really understand what a gradient means. And so I think this can be great to do with kids at any level. So go ahead, and each of you get different images. So you can do this individually or as a team. If you have students, maybe one computer for every 2 kids, so they have to work on that, can be super great. And so take about another minute and a half, and we'll look at some final themes and finish up. Yes. See, we snuck some ELA strategies in here with literacy on top of it all, right, Desiree? And even some science words. If anyone wants to try the one on my screen, feel free. This is one that gets a lot of discussion. Oh, yes, definitely. Now, I will say, Heather, the images are randomly generated each time. And so there's no guarantee as to which one you're going to get. All right, Desiree, you put something in there, but I'm going to ask you, what is ramen? Maybe I'm a kid who hasn't had exposure to this ideal of ramen, and then you get to teach me what ramen is, right? And so let's see how you did here, Desiree. Some people really focus on some of the details. So 83% match. That's pretty good, Desiree. I know that blue circle one gave us some trouble. All right, Dr. Blattner, 77%. Kimberly's fine with AI. Hey, Canvas got sassy with me the other day too. I had to walk away and use Adobe Express. So, but and it just occurred to me, maybe if you need a remote learning activity that gives the kids some authentic stuff, depending on, what might be appropriate, you could say, play with this for 15, 20 minutes, and just see how they do. It does have a gamification aspect to it as well. Um, so Jennifer has shared, and I love this ideal, using AI to create images based on the content area vocabulary, and then students can practice. Yes, they have access to a tool. I love that. So awesome. Okay, we're going to head back over and work on wrapping it up. For this activity, what would you say, which of the domains of the digital promise literacy framework would this fall into, doing this activity? This activity is also fun to do if you're bored at home. People have told me. Yep. I would agree. I think it falls into the use and understand pretty well. Yes. And Marielle, hey, dear friend, happy belated birthday. Lauren or Jen or one of my colleagues will put the link in there for you as well. And we're going to hit some of the last resources. This is one we don't have a lot of time, but AI EDU. If you want some ready-made resources ready to go, I would recommend you go to this link and sign up. Um, they don't send you a lot of emails, but I want to show you, like, when you sign up, they give you resources that are teacher ready. And so I've pulled this. This is one where they give you, and what I love is they also give you the connections, especially to your literacy standards. And these are the national standards, but a lot of the North Carolina standards are very similar. And so you can probably take them, but they give you the slides and you can just take and use them, or you can, adapt them, but they give you everything. Like, it's almost like a prepaid lesson plan. They even have some warm-ups that you can do. And again, they give you a lot of that, like, teacher support and talk to use. Here's one about a hotel that used all AI powered robots, and it didn't go super well. They had robots waking people up because they were snoring and things like that and stuff. So, as we kind of come to the end, there are a couple of other activities in there. Any of these you are welcome to take and use. But these were all about helping to build up this ideal of AI literacy. And so I've tried to provide support in there. The last thing I'll kind of mention, the Crafts Center out of Stanford has a lot of incredible activities you can take and adapt. Now, some of these activities may not be as age appropriate for younger kids, but for your older kids, and especially if you're at high school and you really want to push some of those advanced learners, you can do that, and they're all free. And then we do have resources at the end. The last thing I want you to think about, and I always leave this question, is who owns the content that AI creates? And I'll ask you to put that into a Chat GPT or Gemini or whatever tool you use and just see what it says. So with that said, there are resources at the end. A lot of these are compiled from my colleagues and other people. And so if we can be of any help, please let us know. We're going to go ahead and drop the survey link there. And if you'll fill that out, give us some feedback, that will help us know what we can improve upon, as well as myself. And you'll also get your certificate for attending. We appreciate you all being here today. We're hoping we can all be back face to face with our students and colleagues very soon. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and turn the recording off, and I'm happy to take any questions you all may have. Otherwise, thank you so much, and complete the survey. Stay warm and safe out there.